In the global race for semiconductor dominance, it's not just about who can design the fastest chip. The real battle is often fought at the atomic level, where the absolute purity of every single material can mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Today, we're going to decode a really critical niche player in this high-stakes game, Chengdu Ultra-Pure Applied Materials, or UPAM. They're a company built to solve problems you can't even see.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into why purity has become this massive challenge in modern chipmaking. Then we'll dive into UPM's unique tech and what gives them such a strong competitive edge. After that, we'll tackle their biggest risk and their biggest reward, what we're calling the concentration paradox. And finally, we'll map out where this company could be headed next.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1. To really get UPAM, you first have to understand the almost impossible physics problem they're solving day in and day out in the world of advanced 5-nanometer chips.
Let's just frame it with a simple question. Think about it. In our world, a speck of dust is just an annoyance, right? You wipe it away. But inside a multi-billion-dollar semiconductor fab, how does a single, totally invisible particle become a multi-million-dollar disaster? Well, it all comes down to scale. As we shrink chip circuits to 5 nanometers, and even smaller, our tolerance for any kind of impurity just evaporates. A single nanoparticle flaking off some internal component, it's like a meteor hitting a city, but on the scale of a silicon wafer. That one tiny event can land on a circuit, cause a short, and corrupt an entire batch of chips, literally wasting millions of dollars and weeks of production time.
And that multi-million-dollar problem? That is exactly where UPAM lives. So in this next section, let's look at how this company has built its entire business around making sure that single catastrophic particle never even gets a chance to exist.
This quote right here really nails the core of their story. UPAM has carved out this leadership spot in a super specialized, high-margin market. And, as we're about to see, the fact that they're deeply tied to just a few major clients actually becomes this incredible engine for growth, especially with the whole global push for localized semiconductor supply chains.
So what's their secret sauce? Well, one of their key technologies is something called physical vapor deposition, or PVD. The best way to think about it is like atomic-level spray painting. Inside a perfect vacuum, they literally vaporize an ultra-pure material and then deposit it atom by atom onto a component. What you get is this incredibly dense, unbelievably pure, and super resilient coating that's absolutely vital for the brutal environment inside a 5-nanometer chip-making machine.
And this table just visualizes their technological lead perfectly. Look, conventional methods like atmospheric plasma spraying, or APS, they leave a coating with over 3% porosity. That means it's full of tiny holes where corrosive gases can get in and particles can break off. But UPAM's methods? They create coatings that are orders of magnitude denser, with porosity below 0.01%. That is the technical gap between making old chips and making the 5-nanometer chips that power everything today.
So where does this amazing coating actually go? Well, here are a couple of examples. On the left, you've got a dielectric window. Its job is to let powerful radio frequency energy into a chamber to create plasma, but without getting destroyed by that plasma. And on the right, you have a shower head. It doesn't spray water, it sprays incredibly precise and corrosive gases needed for etching. Both of these parts need to be perfect, and UPAM's coatings ensure they are.
And here's another critical part, the inner liner. Think of this as the armor for the inside of the reaction chamber. It takes all the punishment from the corrosive gases and the high-energy plasma. It protects the multi-million-dollar machine walls, and, most importantly, it stops any contamination from ever reaching that precious silicon wafer in the middle of it all.
So you might be thinking, okay, this is cool tech, but why can't a competitor just copy it? Well, this timeline right here explains that huge barrier to entry. Before a customer will even think about using one of these parts, it has to survive a brutal 12 to 24-month certification gauntlet. We're talking audits, trials, and live tests on active production lines. It's an incredibly long and expensive process, and it creates this massive customer lock-in.
And that technological moat, that deep customer trust, it translates directly into some truly stunning financials. Just look at these numbers. Revenue is projected to grow at a compound rate of over 71%. Net profit, almost 69%. And that gross margin, it's consistently hanging around 60%. This isn't just growth, it's incredibly profitable growth, all built on that defensible tech edge.
Which brings us right to the trickiest part of UPAM's story, that deep integration with customers. The very thing that creates their protective moat also creates a unique challenge. We're calling it the concentration paradox.
This chart just says it all, doesn't it? By 2025, just 2 customers are expected to make up almost 65% of UPAM's total revenue. You add in the next 3, and suddenly the top 5 clients are responsible for nearly 90% of the business. That is some serious concentration.
And, of course, that's a classic double-edged sword. The upside is amazing. You tie your wagon to the fastest-growing leaders in the industry, and your own growth goes into hyperdrive. But the downside is just as real. You're super exposed to the industry's famous boom and bust spending cycles, and you always have that key account shock risk. If you lose just one of those big clients, well, you could see a third of your revenue vanish overnight.
So how do you manage a risk that big? Well, UPAM has this really clever dual drive strategy. It's a hedge. On one hand, they keep going deep with domestic equipment makers, supplying parts for brand new machines. That's their growth engine. But at the same time, they also go directly to the chip factories themselves and offer to supply replacement parts for all the foreign equipment they already have. This creates a much more stable recurring revenue stream that helps cushion them against those big swings in new equipment sales.
All right, for our last section, let's zoom out. Given this whole business model, with its incredible strengths and its unique risks, what does the future actually look like? Just how long is the runway for growth?
Now this slide, for me, just screams opportunity. As of 2024, the localization rate for these critical parts was just over 7%. That tiny little bar on the left is where UPAM and its domestic peers are today. The entire rest of that bar, over 90% of the market, is still being served by imports. That is a massive space to grow into.
And we can put a dollar figure on that opportunity. The total market for these kinds of components is projected to hit over $22 billion by 2029. You don't have to capture all of that to have an incredible growth story. Just grabbing a few more percentage points of that market is a huge deal for a specialized company like UPAM Noon.
And the growth story isn't just about doing more of the same. UPAM's core technology, these ultra-pure coatings, can be used in so many other parts of the chip-making process. They're already expanding from their home base in etching into lithography, metrology, and deposition. And looking even further out, these incredibly durable materials have obvious uses in other high-tech fields, like aerospace and defense. That opens up entirely new worlds of opportunity.
So we kind of end up back where we started. UPAM has built this incredibly powerful, really profitable business on a foundation of extreme specialization and deep customer relationships. Right now, in the global push for supply chain independence, that strategy looks like a genius move for explosive growth. The big question, the one that will really define their future, is whether this hyper-specialization is ultimately a masterstroke or a critical vulnerability in one of the most volatile industries on Earth.